is about in a few words? Or?
Yeah. And at any point, if you're in doubt, just throw it over to me and I'll pick it up where we go.
So welcome to this session on behalf of Berlinale Talents. It's a pleasure. We open today the Drama Series Day, which is going to happen within the European film market, the Berlinale co-production market and Berlinale Talents. This session this afternoon is about floating shapes, how to give stories the right flow. And it's a great pleasure for us to welcome Molly Marlene Stensgaard. She is the editor of most of the Lars von Trier's films like Melancholia, Dancer in the Dark, Dogville. And also a warm welcome to Steve Matthews. He is a drama developer, executive producer for drama development at HBO Europe. So please welcome them. And also a warm welcome to Jakob Kirstein-Högel. He is a long-time consultant for the Dog Station of Berlinale Talents, and he is a former commissioning editor at the Danish Film Institute, and now a consultant and freelance producer. Thank you so much also for hosting the session.
Thank you very much for that introduction. We started by talking about the name of the session that we don't understand, floating shapes, and we even have a native English speaker and he didn't understand it either. So this will definitely be a floating session. It's about working in new ways, and no question is too stupid to ask. Please, at any point, if there's anything you want to share or ask, please do so. This session comes out of a sense that drama series are created in new ways, that the hierarchies that maybe used to be in how drama was produced are at least changing, that there's a collective spirit in drama, a sense of creativity, working in new ways. And it's really a pleasure to have two people who have worked firsthand with drama in new ways. And the main part of this session will be in depth about two specific series, and we'll see quite a few clips from there and hear how did they come about, what was the process behind it. But first I want to ask a little bit about I'm sure actually quite a few in the audience are more used to making films and being in a film environment than being in a drama, series, television environment. Could you say a few words? I mean, this change in how drama is produced, why is that? Is it something, is it a demand from the creative side? Is it something to do with audiences? Do you have ideas of why should it be that things are a little different?
Yes, I definitely come from the feature film side, and I think that for me it's honestly something about that the quality have changed, so it appears much more attractive to me to work with now and during the last 5-10 years maybe than earlier. And I think that it's very strongly connected to the ambition level on the development side. That it's as primarily an editor, it's natural that you are involved in the conceptual side. So I think that some of the values you have from the feature film can actually be transformed into how you develop on drama as well. And on the other hand, I think that there were a lot of inspiration from how drama could be developed into feature as well. So for me it's something about that the quality and the level of ambition within the drama series in Denmark have raised enormously.
Steve?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's partly technology that you can, on a TV budget now, what you can do with a camera, you compare to what everything looked like in Digibeta 10, 15 years ago, it's unwatchable now. So I think, the technology has become affordable for television. And I think it's historical as well. I mean, I suppose I probably would say this, wouldn't I, working for HBO, but you look at the American series in the 90s and you look at shows like, I think, anyway, Homicide: Life on the Street or Murder One or, Twin Peaks. These were all shows that happened before the pay cable revolution. And something was just ready to go. And I think it was about how stations look at drama. If you're a small state broadcaster in a small country, drama is a risky thing, it's expensive, it would be cheaper to do a talent show or something like that. And I think that what the pay cable thing did in the States was it allowed executives to be confident that they've got an audience who are apparently paying to watch drama, so therefore you get a confidence in drama and give it some space and see what that art form can do. So you can track it back to Sopranos and Deadwood and so on and so forth. And then, something is really exciting has been happening in Europe for the last 20 years from you guys, from Scandinavia, from The Killing onwards. So I think that it's just been given room to become the thing that it always wanted to be.
And do you think generally, is it something audiences are appreciating, or is it more an industry let's do things in a different way?
I think it's audience-led. I think it turned out that people wanted really good drama and everybody's had to follow. That's what I believe, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk a little about what does it mean to work collaboratively? I mean, Steve, maybe first, hasn't drama production always been a collaborative effort? A lot of people working together. What's new?
Yes, that is true. I don't think that there's anything much hugely different. But the idea of authorship and what television can do has definitely changed. When I used to work on a show, I worked on the BBC. I kind of learned my craft as a script editor and script doctor on a British show called Silent Witness, and it's a kind of pathology show with dead bodies. And I think I worked on series 11, 12, and 13. It's still going at about series 20 or something like that. Probably somewhere in the distant depths of history, somebody created that show. But and over the years, it's slightly changed. Different producers would come in, different teams. When I was there, we edged it a little bit more pretty and a little bit CSI. The next guy who came in edged it a little bit to social realism. But there was no one knew what it was. Nobody knew what it had to be. Perfectly respectable show. But certainly there's been a move towards an authorship. You didn't know who created Silent Witness, but you do know who created The Sopranos and Deadwood. So there's definitely been a move in that direction. Empowering the writer is what's changed, and audiences have responded.
And Molly, you have worked in... Denmark is pretty known for working collaboratively. What does that mean? I mean, for you, what is it? Because obviously on a set there are many people, they have to work together. But in this context, what is collaboration?
I think that for me, the starting point is always the same, at least, right? That I think that if you work as an editor, if you develop feature scripts, if you try to do some conceptual work on a TV show, I think that for me it's also the willingness to start with the core or the essence of what is this show about, or what is this feature film about. I think that's the starting point for everything. As we talked a bit about yesterday as well, I think that talk is actually the thing, that you do start to talk a lot about what is this about. Is it like Norskov that we are going to see some clips from is about community. It's about the individual towards the community and thoughts like that. So I think that's the starting point for any kind of qualified discussion, and I think that has been there in the development of feature films for many years, but I haven't really been involved in that way of talking with TV shows before. So that was new for me, and I think that's basically what you do. It's pretty simple. That's where you start, at least.
And who talks? Who does the talking?
I think that in this case, a combination of writer, director, editor, DOP, and production designer started the talking.
So it's a collective of 6 people chatting
Yes.
away.
And then I think that there was a group of conceptual people, and then there was a lot of work that were done with only DOP, editor, director. There was work that were done with director, DOP, production designer, with editor, composer. It was, but I think that was the conceptual director had sort of the torch, and also had the important communication with the writer, because that's, of course, very different when you come from feature. It's very different that you work, that the writer has another position. So we started up very groupy, plenum-like, and then later on we worked more in separate, smaller groups.
And you mentioned one thing you used in your method.
I think that the first time we met, we all have read the scripts, of course, the scripts that were available at that time. And we have this idea of a circle of trust. It sounds very hippie-like and very Danish, but I think that it's something about creating a circle where nothing is stupid. And then we brought clips, photos, paintings, pieces of music, whatever. And showed for some reason this photo gives meaning to me, because it's connected to this whole idea of community in this way. That could be a starting point of a conversation.
Did you have a circle of trust on the pathology series?
Not in the same way, because that was definitely an old-fashioned way of doing it. We knew what the characters were. We knew that there needed to be some clues and some plots and some dead bodies, and we'd go and find writers. They were individual 2-hour episodes, so there was a filmic kind of vibe to it. But it was a bit kind of scatterish in terms of, it was a little bit random compared to what you have to have now, I think, where you need that coherency of a world, of a core idea. And I think, a lot is talked about in terms of the difference between film and television, and it's not, when I said empowering the writer, which is a very important part of it, but it's not just as simple as saying, in film the director is in charge, in television the writer is in charge. Certainly television is longer, certainly television is probably more dialogue based, but it still is kind of a team kind of thing. I worked on the Showtime show, The Borgias, and that was run by Neil Jordan. Neil Jordan's got an Oscar on his mantelpiece. He was writing the whole of the first series, and he was directing the first 2 episodes. So on that show, there was an absolute clarity. I'm not saying he wasn't collegiate, he was completely, but you knew where to look. He knew how red the Cardinals' outfits should be, and he absolutely knew everything. So you knew what you were doing on that show. The show that I did after that, but before I took on the HBO job, which I'm going to show some clips of, was this little relatively low budget Irish thing, and that really did turn into a little kind of square of me, the other producer, and the director and the writer, and how it was interesting, and how I think it should be done, how it started with me and the writer in a room talking. What are we going to do next year? What are the concepts? What are the ideas? Where do we want to take these characters? And then as it goes forward, by that time I've kind of climbed into his head. I know exactly what it is that he's trying to achieve. Then I can step away, leave him to finish the scripts, and then when I arrive on set, I'm pretty 99% sure I know what he would want. And when it really works, those divisions between producer and director and writer start to fall away. And when it's magical, when you get that flow, is you're just a bunch of people and you all know you're trying to make the same thing. That's a critical thing.
And a huge advantage is that talk is cheap.
Exactly, yeah. And shooting is expensive, yeah.
That finding out things while you're shooting can be quite expensive.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of, I mean, the 2 series we'll watch are very different in many ways, but what binds us together is a particular way of working, of discussing between people. Just one question: does this mean that this way of working, that scripts are less important for drama, thought of in this way, or how do you see that?
No, definitely not. I don't think. I think that Norskov is clearly a show where the way it's done is quite. It's not the one-to-one expectation, I think, when you read the script. So I think there's quite a difference between the script and the finished shows. But I think that the script is sort of like the base of it, and the thing you need to figure out what the core is, and as you said, Steve, be on the same page, right? That all of us know where we're going. So the script is as important as it has been before as well, I think.
But in the traditional industrial mode of series, the script was something that just had to be executed. Or is that?
That's what that's definitely what I believe. I mean, the script is still as important, possibly more important than it's ever been, because the writer is more respected and more powerful. But that's not to say that what you do is work on the script and then it's finished and it's perfect and it's tied up in a neat little bow and then it's handed over to this hairy-ass crew who then go and make it. It's not as simple as that. In fact, I like it. The show that we're doing in Czech Republic at the moment with this very bright young writer, it's an 8-hour series with genre elements. And basically what my job is with HBO at the moment is trying to help and support the creatives that we have in the different territories, very much trying to ensure that their voices and their stories are coming through, but the territories that I work in don't have the years of experience in storylining that I'm used to in the UK, so I'm hopefully offering support and helping them sharpen things up. I'm never going to argue with Stepan over what a particular nuance means in some dialogue in Czech, but I will say to him, like I'm telling you, your second act turning point is lacking in pace, and that's the way that I work. But on that particular show at the moment, we're nearly halfway through the shooting. We're looking at the first 2 episodes that are just coming together as an assembly, and he hasn't really finished 7 and 8 yet. So the script is still alive. It's not finished yet. So it is not, you don't just do the script and then you go and shoot it. It's very useful. Production hate it. They want the scripts to be completely done and finished and planned and all done in one block. But the whole thing is still alive, including the script process, I think.
So another layer of floating away.
And collaboration, and that flow is always going. What I sometimes find, if I'm any good at my job, what I sometimes find is, the writer's writing away episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and we've had that 3 months of talking before he put pen to paper, and then he's kind of hitting episodes 5 and 6 or something like that. And on the Irish show I'm talking about, I say, Stuart, have you noticed that these themes are coming up? Look at these shapes of men and women and this and that. Have you realised that you're writing about this? And he'd go, no, I didn't really. And you can spot that and start to use it and lay it in. So it's all happening right the way through to the edit. You're still writing, really. You're still writing with different tools.
Laying the tracks while you're driving the train?
The whole thing is alive. We used to talk on the Irish thing about, the difference between a treatment and a script. A treatment is when you plan out the plot and you write it down and here's what's going to happen and he's going to go here. And inevitably it changes. And we used to talk about that as being a kind of framework up which to grow some roses so that we could make the trellis. But the script itself is alive and it's organic. And any decent writer will tell you that if they sit down and write a story and a plot and a plan and then they go to script it, they will find that their characters refuse to do what you thought they were going to do, which is a headache because you've got to step back and replot it. But it's a really good sign because it tells you your characters are coming alive.
Yeah, question here.
You were talking about the circle of trust, Martin. I think that's not a very usual way of working on a series with the editor and everyone in the group. Can you talk about what the benefits are of working like that?
Can I just see, could you hear the question up in the back? No, the question was Molly's concept of circle of trust, that's not a usual way of working on series, and to expand a bit on it.
I think it should be the usual way to work on a TV series, but I think that there are two benefits, right? One is that it adds something to the series, of course. That should be expected. But I think that the other benefit is that after that work, everybody knows where you're going. So it's actually, after doing that work, it's much easier for me to go to the other 4 or 5 editors and talk to them about what this is about. So there is I think that the benefit of everybody being in sync, so to say, is quite big as well, besides from the fact that you add some filmic quality to the series. Can I ask Steve something?
Yeah, please.
I'm just thinking this. I think it's quite inspiring, the fact that, and maybe closer to documentary, the fact that you keep things open and alive by circumstances. So actually, but I think do you think it would benefit feature films to do like that? It would be chaos, funding-wise, but do you think that it could benefit feature films as well?
I don't see why not. I don't really see huge differences between processes. I'm a TV guy, I'm an old TV guy, I don't really know anything about film. The fundamental difference between a film and a television series is a television series is longer. That's really, that's the bottom line. It's really hard to write 8 hours of television on your own, so you either need some help or you need a writer's room or a showrunner or all these different kind of systems, but I don't see why not. Only on our, you know, what we were never going to have the luxury in terms of our budgets of the kind of rehearsals that but you know, the people like Mike Leigh don't have a script and they go in and they put something together. But on our show, the budgetary pressures versus our ambition in terms of the script was such that we really made a fine art of that thing that you're talking about, which is talk is cheap for 5 months, but when you get there on the day, you got to get through these 8 pages with a move, and those actors, there's no room for, oh, I can't find my core. You know, you got to know your lines and you got to get it done, and that's involved, you know, and that is as much rehearsal as you can do, and talking to them as well,
And what is your feeling about, for instance, corporate headquarters? Because the industrial way has a certain, you say the production guys like it more, they know exactly what's going on, but there's an economic argument here that actually you save money by being, you're both saying that, by being in sync before shoot. Does that rub off? Is that argument valid in
what do you mean? Sorry.
In corporations? I mean, HBO headquarters. Do they understand that logic that if you talk a lot, if you keep it live, if you do all these things, it's actually also maybe a money-saving device, or is that a bit lost on them?
I don't know. You know, it's showbiz. You're doing a show. There's. I'm not. I mean, if you want to talk about global strategies or audience definitions, I'm not the guy. I don't know. I just bumble through my career, and people give me money to make things, which is great. I don't believe it's any different anywhere else, really. I think that I've very much enjoyed my career since I got out of the UK, and I'm enjoying this job at the moment because I certainly think I'm mistrustful of myself. Anything that's too kind of focus groupy, anything that's coming from above saying we should have more on this than the other. You know, it's only true if it grows from down there and comes up. I think, but I don't think it's any different. I believe quite strongly that the closer the development and writing thing is, you know, I enjoyed the Borgias because it's being written up in that room, and then Neil could go down to the set and go backwards and forwards. The UK certainly did have a system of development is in London in nice offices, and everybody goes for a nice lunch. And then production is cold and horrible in a car park somewhere, and that separation of writing and production, I'm very mistrustful of. But no, however big the corporation, in the end, it's a bunch of guys with a camera trying to make something, I think.
Yep. There's a question up there.
On, you know, they've seen the thank you. They've
Could you maybe repeat the last bit? The audience reaction to the story is changing.
So how they perceive the story, you know, every week there tends to be one new episode or so on and so forth. How do you feel that their perception, maybe at the end of that episode, or maybe towards the end of a series, you know, they say, maybe I want to see more of this next season or something like that. Do you feel that that has a really big impact on how the writers and the producers shape the rest of the future of the story?
I can only speak for myself, and I think you can't ignore it. It's a really interesting question. It's a really interesting question on a series, when you go on from series to series to series. Essentially what we were doing is we're going to shoot what we're going to shoot, and it's so fast that there wasn't much adjustment we can do in the shoot, but you do listen between series. I mean, you know, the old American way was, you know, that you'd get a message from the dog food company saying everybody hates this character, I want that character out. That was the kind of 50s and 60s way of doing it. Very, very fast reactions to audiences. If it's really flowing and if it's really alive, it's a very difficult question. I believe you do have to listen. You have to listen to the audience. You have to listen to the audience. And you get a very quick response these days with the whole Twitter thing and all the rest of it. It's not hard to know what the audience thinks any more than it's hard, you know, if you're on the Elizabethan stage and people are throwing cabbages at you, you know pretty quickly where you are. It's really interesting. There was a show in the UK recently called Jekyll and Hyde, and it was a kind of Saturday evening tea time show roughly in the Doctor Who slot, and whether they did it deliberately or not, it was kind of quite violent, and there was quite a lot of stuff in the press about it. And the creator of the show, who I admired very much, went on record saying, "Fuck the audience." And I remember thinking, we used to say that, but we used to shut the door before we said that. No, I mean, but yeah, we were so you can't ignore it, but that doesn't mean that you slavishly, you know, doesn't mean you slavishly follow it. Our show was a gangster show, and that game is with a bad guy protagonist, but hopefully compelling and interesting, and you're making. The major adjustments we made were kind of moral. We would create a character, and the show was a kind of unexpected hit. And we would make adjustments, frankly, when characters were becoming too popular. Because we were like, this is a gangster show. These are bad people, and they are bad people. Now, we need the show to be entertaining or nobody's going to watch it. And the writer was a writer who was able to write from the inside with a great deal of humanity about these people. But when we had a character who was a bad guy and a murderer, and then the catchphrases were starting to catch on around town, we sometimes kind of adjusted back. No, I don't want the audience to like this guy that much. He's still a horrible person. So you're definitely listening. You're definitely listening. But I believe that doesn't necessarily mean you're slavishly following.
Interesting, a moral twist and turns. Let's go to the clips. And Molly, you're starting and say a little about the whole series universe.
In short, Norskov is about a city in the outskirts of Denmark, threatened to die financially. And a mayor who are struggling to change that, and just before he succeeds bringing a new big high school to town, a young girl is found overdosed on coke, and it seems like there's coke all over the countryside, which is the truth in Denmark. And then a policeman is called in to try to do something about that situation, and that policeman comes from this little town, and he comes back with the idea that he needs home and roots and stuff like that. So in general, the series is about what home is, and this kind of community, and what it means to belong somewhere, and how far you should go to preserve that.
And it was developed. It was developed on site, or the writer spent a long time in one particular town.
Yes, it's filmed in one town. It's not called Norskov, but everything is filmed in the same town. And when it was premiering, they changed all the city signs to Norskov when you were driving into the city. That was pretty lovely. And should I say something about the first
Yeah.
clip? Yeah. I think that in general, what we really tried to do in the conceptual team, as it's called, was to try to figure out, okay, how does community look? What does it mean? How do we try to achieve a strong sense of connection between places, between characters? We also had the idea that we wanted to bring an inner life to the show, meaning that sometimes it should feel more subjective in the sense that it was experienced from a certain character's point of view. That was something about the way we work with sound, the way that it was always shot on location, that you could always see somewhere else. If you were in one location, it was great if you could look out at another location. In this specific first piece, it's from the opening. The big thing is in this little town is ice hockey. Is it called that directly translated? I think. And the whole town is in this little in the ice hockey stadium, and the young girl ODs outside. So I think that what we try to do is to give a sense of community, to give a sense of fatal incidents. And you should notice that in the end there, the mayor is having a conversation with the regional mayor above him, so to say. And we tried to make that quite specific, simple little scene more experienced from his point of view by editing in a certain way that we chose to call merge. Which is something about montaging more. It makes more sense when you see it, I hope. Otherwise, I can explain more about it.
Sure. Let's roll the first. See it emerge.
I think that it's most of the conceptual teams were maybe used to do more edgy, arty feature films in a way, and I think that it's also pretty important to figure out in where are we, what are the possibilities within a quite broad flow TV show like this. So we tried to find some quite simple tools of how to work. For instance, removing the sound, the use of music, this little thing that it's kind of like some transitions between scenes that becomes a bit montage-like. I think that it will make no audience jump in the seat and say, "What the hell? I don't understand anything." So it was something about finding some tools that were pretty simple and that worked on a clear emotional level. So that was part of the development, that it should, of course, still fit. That's obvious, but that's actually a difficult part of the work, I think, to find a way that suits the story and suits the core of it. So we had this idea that if we ever felt that something was just smart or cool, it should die immediately, because that was not the purpose.
Yep. Question up here.
In film and in TV is trying to keep intact, thank you, trying to keep intact the same production team, because it always amazes me when you bring a group of people together, whether it's in sport, whether it's in business, or in any other activity, it's always hard to come up to a point of mutual understanding. And with film production teams, I would imagine, whether it's in TV or in film, if it's a team that has worked together in the past, then they can more efficiently and maybe even faster work together in coming up with a result. So for the two of you, is there a tendency of working with the same teams over time? with each new production?
I have a long-term marriage almost with Lars von Trier, and he's definitely very, very loyal to the people he works with, because you're absolutely right. It's easier if you know people, but it's not a demand.
Exactly, particularly on a series when you're going on one to another. When I first came into the industry, I thought, why do the same people keep working together all the time? Wouldn't it be better to kind of mix ideas? Very quickly learn, if you can get through a show and not kill each other, then you've got something special already. And it means that what I think is that, we had to have a different DOP on our last series, and it was absolutely great, and the new guy was fantastic. People do drop away, but certainly if you're running on a series, then it certainly helps. It means that you get a short, it's a difficult relationship. You have days when you have rows. It is like a marriage, but you get a shorthand and it goes faster. So if you can, it's definitely good. But I've also learned, the thing that I did in Ireland, I was a very, very happy experience and very, very good friends that I've made. And that shows probably, I don't know, I can't speak for them, but I'm not there anymore. But you can't necessarily replicate it. The next show will be a different thing in a different family and in a different set of dynamics. But within a continuing series, yes, if you can, yeah.
How long were you together as a team on the Irish series? I think
4
we should
years,
move
four series. Yeah.
And that is quite unusual to have 3 people working together.
Yeah, I think
for
we all
4 years.
really liked each other to start, and then somewhere around the middle, I think we probably all hated each other, and then we all loved each other again, because eventually you know each other's flaws and you forgive each other. It's good, it's good.
Say a little more about the series and show us a clip.
Should I do mine? Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to. The series was called Love Hate. It ran for 5 series. I came on the second series. All 4 series I did were all 6 hours, and it was a gangster show. It was very simply a gangster show with all the mechanisms of the gangster show that go back to Falstaff, if you really want to argue it that way. And what the writer had found is that, there was a lot going on in the north side of Dublin at the moment. In fact, if there's anybody here from Ireland or even the UK, there's been murders in the last couple of weeks. So this is an issue that he certainly felt wasn't being talked about. And when we were at our best, I think we got quite good at balancing a conscious construction of how a particular thrillerish genre works with what Stuart had to say politically, although I wouldn't necessarily say political writer. And I think what Stuart did very well was being able to write in. We were criticised for being dark and for being violent and for giving a bad reputation to a particular segment of Irish society. But Irish society didn't seem to agree with that, because it turned out we were telling the truth and that was recognised. So, Ireland's got quite a low population. This was an extremely courageous commission, I believe, by the state broadcaster RTE. Dublin is a significant part of the population of Ireland, and Northside Dublin is half of Dublin, and it felt, once you look back on it, that there was not only a story to tell about these people, but stories to tell for these people as well. And that was, I think, was the thing that people recognised, that we weren't looking at a kind of working. This is what Stuart's ability as a writer was, and this is really what this clip is for. Not that kind of way of looking at a working class from like in a goldfish bowl or in a zoo. He had an ability to think himself and believe himself right in there. It was for and about these people. So the clip that I want to show is fairly practical. It's one of the things that I think is always useful to talk about, and this flow thing. This flow thing has a suggestion of something that just kind of flows along automatically, and you step back and you let it happen. And it's not quite like that. Producing, the visual image I always have for producing is there's a snowball running down the hill and you're desperately trying to stop it from crashing off the sides. But sure as hell the momentum is there, but that doesn't mean that these things are kind of necessarily easy to do. So I'm always slightly mistrustful of the kind of the artist who is struck by lightning. You know, the 10,000 hours thing. It's hard work, and it remains hard work. So this magic flow thing, there's a lot. It's like a swan. It should be moving along very smoothly on the surface, but the feet are really paddling away underneath. It's hard. It's hard right to the very end, right to the very last cut, right to the last mix. So within this kind of collegiate, we're all friends, we all love each other, nobody's really anything kind of thing, in the end, the actor has to go and stand up there and give a performance. In the end, the director has got to get the shots. In the end, the writer has got to write something. And that's what this kind of clip is about. So we're just coming into the second series, and in this scene, we're meeting again a young woman who was a character in the first series. She's the sister of one of the gangsters. And Stuart, by the time I came on, this was already pretty well storylined. And she's what I would call an entry character. She's an ordinary woman, a single mother. She's got problems with debt, and this is a scene about loan sharking and debt collection. And the other thing we're doing in the scene is introducing a new character, a new bad guy. This isn't actually the first time he appeared in screen in the episode. I think it's the second, but this was where we really wanted to kind of catch what he was about. So it's an example of how the voice thing, the voice is talked about. What does a writer do? What does voice mean? And I think there's an interesting scene about how things are written. What we wanted to do was have a scene where this guy turns up on her doorstep and says, I'm looking for your brother. He owes me some money. And she says, I don't know anything about this. And he says, and this was all planned. There are jobs that the scene needed to do that Stuart and I had been through. We want to establish this woman again. We want to establish her in a home domestic environment. We want to make her an every woman that will be very recognizable to the audience. And we want her to be strong and tough. We want to bring this guy in. He's a bad guy. He's a loan shark. It had to deliver certain kind of things. And one of the things to talk about in kind of creative thing is that what you see on the screen is eventual synthesis of choice. The thing that you see one thing, you don't see the other 999 things that it could have been. You're always choosing. And what I love about this scene is the heart of it is she needed to owe him some money, and we didn't want her to owe money. We didn't want her to have borrowed money because she's got a child sick with cancer or anything big like that. It needed to be small. It needed to be everyday. It needed to be something that people would be able to relate to. And it was the choice of the thing that Stuart found is the writing. Because in the end, what we used to talk about was we'd plan it and talk about it, and we've got the idea and we've got the concept and we know what it's going to be. We know what the scene has got to do. But in the end, he has to go and be a writer. He has to close the bedroom door and he's got to write the damn thing. And this is a piece of writing, which I'll tell you why I think it's interesting. So, okay. I realise now I should probably have brought a subtitle version because it's technically in English, but I look at it, even I can barely understand it.
Technically English.
But it's the Irishness of it is very Ireland, a country that loves words and poetry, and you can see we've got a very on-the-shoulder kind of style. We got a great deal of support for how realistic, about how realistic we were. There is nothing realistic about that speech. You listen to that speech, you look at it on paper, that is really, really written. So in the first part of when Fran is talking, he's going, Darren, blah, 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 no complaints. That's a rhetorical device that you've seen since Cicero. Okay, it really is. Somehow, of all the things he could have chosen that money was chosen, that she needed money for, at some point that year, he must have heard about somebody who'd had a building problem where a builder had put the wrong plaster on a wall. Inside plaster on the outside wall. Inside plaster on the outside wall. It's a sprung rhythm. It's written like poetry. And the line that I can't believe we get away with, another device of alliteration, call the cops. Cops come, they don't come, they never come when you call. All those hard C's. It's almost Elizabethan. It's so compact. And yet it's done in such a way that you kind of believe it. So all drama is heightened. It's all fake. It's all fake. And I think that's quite a good example of the kind of elbow room that a writer has to really do the thing that it is their job to do that you wouldn't have been able to do 10 or 15 years ago.
The bits that we missed, those of us who didn't understand Irish exactly, I mean, he is actually asking for money for some building that has, sorry.
Her brother has borrowed money for him for some building work on her house. Okay. And then through some plot reasons he's missing, and he's trying to get his money back.
I may be thick. It's probably only me.
It was close to slam poetry for me.
I love the sound of it.
You could really hear the sound of it more than the
rhythms of the speech. You know, the truth of it is in the I need something today. That's what these guys say on your doorstep. That's the little bit of realism. I look at it again, and that line about the bags are on everybody's back every day. I can feel the politics now. We wouldn't have done that 2 series later. It was just to me that theme is coming across a little bit. But that is a scene, you know, in terms of shooting, cameras there. There's nothing. It's about the writing. That was all about the writing. And that, funnily enough, was the character who, because he had this charm and charisma that made that speech, that we actually fell slightly into the temptation of enjoying him too much, and he was the one that we actually adjusted back to the dark side a couple of series later, actually.
Bad guys cannot be as talkative as he is.
Bad guys can't. This is the point of what Stuart was trying to do, really, is that, as you were saying, it's about a community. It's about he had an ability to write from the inside. So it's a moral issue which you are dealing with. I mean, you're thinking about it there in your sequence there. When she's doing the coke and those kids are in the car and the music is going, you want to be with them. And you go, well, that's not right. You know, and these are all the kind of courageous choices that morality isn't black and white, that I think all of the pay cable and the Sopranos thing has been able to do. Stuart wanted to say very clearly, these are bad people, but they are human beings, and they've got girlfriends and wives and babies, and they go to the cinema on a Saturday, and they go down the pub on a Friday night, and they're funny guys, and they tell good stories. But they're bad people. And between those 3 layers, we were playing that all the time. But what Stuart wanted very much to do is to destroy a kind of myth that they're over there and different from us. It's circumstances, it's poverty, it's social, and all those reasons, which I hope we didn't overdo. But the primary job is a woman being threatened by a scary guy, so hopefully it's exciting.
I suppose I'm one of the lucky people who's been able to see Love Hate, and I'm just wondering, for both of you, how far ahead do you plan? Because obviously in Love Hate there's a big shift as to who the kind of main characters are as it goes on, and I know you kind of said that you reacted a bit to the audience, but was it a case that Stuart had planned as far ahead as he did, or was it a case of the characters became more important and that's why you shifted?
No, it is, I can say, we had a pretty good idea of series 4 and 5 together, but that was the only time. Once we'd done 3, we had a pretty good idea. But when I see a pitch document for a series and it says, and there's 3 pages explaining what's going to happen in series 4 and series 4, I'm extremely mistrustful of it, because I don't believe you can or should plan that far ahead, because you need that room to let things change, So no, we didn't have a thought in our head other than surviving series 2 at that point. And
there's a question up here.
Hi, Molly. I just wanted to ask. You've worked, married to like one of the great visionary filmmakers of our time, and I'm just wondering what's the biggest difference between working with someone like Lars von Trier, who is such a distinctive voice, and working on a television show which has to be a more communal thing and has many more voices in the room editorially. What's the big difference, I suppose?
First of all, I'm not really married to him. I just want to stress that.
Some
that
women
was
who would be upset.
yeah. But I think that the process is not so different. But of course the content is. But I think that challenge of finding. Basically, I think that all of the work that I do, no matter if it's early in the process or late in the process, is trying to find the right filmic language for that story. So I think that is similar. I think that the difference between Lars von Trier and a show like Norskov is that Lars von Trier is much more twisted and strange and complex, but basically it's still something about trying to find the right language to bring the vision or the key essence of what we're doing forward. And collaboration-wise, it's exactly the same, actually. Lars von Trier is a very collaborative director, so that process is kind of the same. But of course, there's a difference between the content with him and Norskov.
Let's see another clip from Norskov, and we will also see some Lars von Trier at some point. Yep.
Yes. Yes, the next clip is something. I chose that because I think it's a beautiful little filmic moment. It's really a moment, actually, in a quite normal, so to say, show. And I think that for me, that is part of the interesting challenge. That if it's possible to start working with that when you do TV series, I find that really intriguing. And it's small steps, it's small stuff. It's a way to try to increase the emotional moment. It's again this merge idea of how we did transitions. That was not between all scenes. I must stress that. But in this case, I think the transition between the scene where there's a couple discussing in a car, and she leaves, and the transition to the next scene is done in this merging way, which is quite simple, something about taking a part from the next scene and adding into the end of the former scene. It's very simple.
Flash forward type?
Yeah, it is in a way. If you had two scenes that would normally just shift with a clip, then you take a small part of the following scene and enter to the first scene. That's in principle what we do, and we use the principle to stress the connection and to make some other filmic or visual elements occur.
That was a rough cut.
That was a cliffhanger. No,
we shouldn't have had the sex in the beginning, but a little more of this.
It's typical editor thing. I just care about the transition and the. No, but I think that it's as you said, Steve, as well. There's a lot of scenes in this show that are quite simple. It's just do you call it a cross between two people? Yeah. But I think it's something about finding where to put your energy in a way, and where you can actually lift things a little bit out of just normal to be more inner and more subjective, without losing contact to what this is, what kind of show this is.
I understood the merge thing this time. Can you say where would it work and where would it not work? You said you didn't use it throughout.
I think that it works when it actually connects something. I think that in this case it works as it's pointing to some kind of innocence that were lost in this woman, and not in a very, in my opinion at least, in a very direct or symbolic way, but there is just an element of innocence in between, in the middle of something that have lost its innocence. Also between these two people that are old lovers, and certainly in this woman. So used like that, it worked, I think. Used like making things go a little faster and making a boring transition a little bit better, it didn't work.
Okay.
So that was kind of
the bullshit filter came on.
Yeah.
One part of the process that we haven't talked that much about, we talked about audience input, but it's also specialist input. how do other people, and you have a clip connected to something with notes, am I right?
Yeah, exactly. I just think, before I go into that, it's both of your clips. It's fascinating to see how this is where television and cinema are coming together, isn't it? The devices that you're using. You know, the first one where you drop out the sound to get the emotional impact. This, the end of that first clip where you've got the body on the ground, where now, in a way that you couldn't 10 years ago, you can get that landscape. It's beautiful. You know, a great deal of efficiencies in television. That is going to take a certain amount of time to light, but you wouldn't have been able to do it 10 years ago. I love that little kind of hard sound cut when he says, was it your Coke? And you go to the feet, and you're talking about hard sound cuts. You wouldn't have been talking about this stuff in European TV 10 years ago. It would have been much more dialogue-based. So the writer is empowered. Many more, and people have got better sound systems at home, and they've got better TVs, and this is all part of it, isn't it? It's all part of it.
It wouldn't have been, the people involved wouldn't have come up with solutions like that 10 years ago.
You wouldn't have been able to hear on your TV at home
well, yeah.
that impact of the cut to there, so you wouldn't have done it. So technology is a big part of it. It is a big part of it. Which is circumstance again, which is what the next clip is, because people are always interested in notes, and I don't know whether there's a big difference in film or television or not, but if you're a writer or producer or director in TV, you're going to get notes. It's part of the thing. When I worked with Neil on The Borgias, that's the most powerful person I've ever had dealings with, who was able to be pretty strong with notes from the broadcaster. And I just, because you should be open, because you should have this balance of confidence in what you're doing, but listening to other people. It is collegiate. The guys who are writing the check for you are entitled to opinion, and you should listen. My best note about advice is that bad notes are usually notes that come to you and tell you to do something. And you go, wow, that's a terrible idea. Why would you say that? And the why is the critical thing. Good notes are notes that come through and say, you have a problem here. Now, maybe you could do this, but what you very often do is, what you often find then is you go, yeah, they're right, they have identified a problem, you're fully entitled to come up with a different solution to it. The bad notes are the ones that just tell you to do things when you can't follow them. But this is quite a good story about how it's about listening and how circumstances can change and can unblock this mysterious flow thing that we're talking about. So I have to give you a little bit of kind of backstory of the scene that I'm going to show. Essentially, the first series was a kind of, that I didn't work on, was a revenge tragedy involving a young man called Darren, played the brother of the woman that we just saw, played by a very popular young Irish actor called Robert Sheehan, who was a big hit in a UK show called Misfits, very gorgeous and a star in the making. And his brother is killed, and he ends up having a storyline with the gang, which at this point is being run by a character called John Boy. And John Boy is played by Aidan Gillen, who was Carcetti in The Wire and is now Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. So first series, revenge tragedy, all gets sorted out, everybody's still alive. Second series, when I came onto it, Stuart already knew that he wanted to do the downfall of a gang boss. That's these guys, they end up doing too much of their own coke, they end up in a complete mess, and then, eventually somebody from within the organization takes them down. So he wanted to do the palace coup story within a construction. And in the first series, there was another character called Nidge. And Nidge was a kind of lieutenant level. He was sort of second in command and had been conceived really as a fairly comic character. He was the guy who would, make sure the drugs arrived on time, had funny scenes with his wife, who we would always lie to. And as we watched what he'd done in the first series, you knew there was a fabulous actor here, rather trained, totally, the technique was magnificent. And there was something about the character, the sheer gusto with which he would lie to his wife about where he'd been last night, had this little frisson of something. You just wished you could lie like him. It was something likable and horrible about him all at the same time. And because he was such a good actor, we knew that he was the guy that we wanted to take over the gang. We knew he was going to be the main guy. So we come into the second series and he starts to write it and it's plotted and all the rest of it. And essentially what happens is that Darren, a lovely pretty young boy, is forced by his debt, we've just seen his sister being threatened, back into the arms of John Boy, who is getting crazier and crazier and more paranoid. And John Boy pressures Darren into committing a murder, which is the big deal of episode 2. And that was all going fine, and we were plotting away, and he'd written about 3 episodes, and it was all fine. But Stuart, something was bugging him. And how do you create? We were saying we were going to take this guy, this relatively minor character, and by the end of the series, he was going to be the lead of the show. And we're looking at Tony Soprano, and we're looking at Walter White, who's in existence at the moment, and really consciously thinking, how do you create these kind of gangster characters? And you can't just come at it intellectually. There was a point at which Stuart had it. He knew what the guy was. He knew that there was a kind of absence. There was a lack of morality. He was something he wanted to say, but he hadn't yet found the mechanism for it to come out, to come alive, to come across on the screen. And he was struggling with it and struggling with it and struggling with it. And then we got a note. And we got a note from the guy who runs the production company, a great guy called James Flynn, who very much left us alone, essentially a businessman, gave us he'd hate me for saying that, but who left us alone on the creative nitty-gritty, gave us very few comments, but when we got one, it would be big, it would be strategic, and we would listen. And he said to us, are you sure that you want Darren, the beautiful young man, Robert Sheehan, the pin-up boy for 1 million teenage girls in Dublin, and you want to turn him into a murderer? He's actually going to commit murder. Are you sure? Have you really thought through what that's going to mean to the audience? So Stuart looked at me and said, yeah, we should listen to this one. I don't believe there was any question for 1 second that he was going to change what he was going to do, but how do we do it? And he said, okay, what do we do about this, Steve? And I said, and this is what I do for a living, as a structure guy, I said, well, there's the practical answer to that is we must create a new scene that increases the pressure on Darren, because therefore the less choice that he has, when he goes ahead and does it, we'll be able to keep more sympathy. So we need somebody to tell him to do it as hard as possible. And I said, so presumably it's another scene with Aidan Gillen. It's the gang boss, it's John Boy. It's John Boy. And he was sitting there, we were in a hotel where we worked a lot in the bar, and he went, no, it's not John Boy, it's Nidge. It's Nidge. I know it's Nidge. And then he started to talk under his breath. He started to talk and sketch, and this is the scene that he wrote. So it's not even a particularly kind of well-known or talked about scene from the show in itself, but for us, for Stuart, it was some damn kind of birthday. He just got this, and I remember I was sitting with him. He goes, "No, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck about anybody, man. Don't give a fuck." And he just hit on a blackness in this character. He hit on a generation that didn't care. There's something just resonated, and from that moment, it was like he then had the petrol. He then had the fuel to drive that character for another 3 series. It was a huge turning point and came totally from left field.
Loads of questions here. Yeah? Please, do you have a microphone?
Hi. Earlier you mentioned that if you get a 3 4 pages proposal, you mistrust it from the beginning because you need space for creative change. How would you describe the ideal proposal for a TV show?
Sorry, I mean, if I see something that very specifically lays out, this is what's going to happen in series 4, I was thinking, you don't know that, you just don't know that, you just don't know that. And you can't. And there's something in the job that I'm doing at the moment, which is great, where I'm working with writers who are all voice, they're all raw talent, they're fantastic, they're young, but by definition of the territories that they're working in, they haven't got 10, 15 years of storylining experience behind them. So they all come in and say, I've got this great idea, there's a mystery and there's a crime, and you go, oh great, how many episodes? 15. Great, who's going to write it? I am. And you think, you've no idea. You have no idea what you are suggesting that you're going to do. I don't know, on paper, in my experience, the things that have really happened have generally started with a conversation, have generally started with a producer who knows a writer, and you talk, and it kind of comes out of that, and the pitch document comes afterwards. It's quite rare for some reason that something just comes in through the post and gets made. But the advice that I would give is that storylining, if you're really talking about a pitch, if you're really talking about the very, very, very first seed, the first thing that I'm going to read, I don't want to read 40 pages of detailed storyline. I want to understand that core idea. The first thing is I want to know what it is that you're trying to do, what's the central idea, and then I'll help you with that other stuff, because I know more about the carpentry than you do. But if that idea is really sings off the page, and it can be done in a paragraph,
And it doesn't even need to contain story, is that what you're saying? It could be...
Everything has a little bit of a story. I want to see the demonstration that you've done some work, and if I really say to you, a paragraph will do, you'll send me 10 paragraphs every day, and that doesn't work either. But what I'm saying is that I like to see things early in their formation, because I seem to be quite good at getting in there early and helping to shape it. That's just me. Another producer might want to see a more detailed outline, but...
There was another question up here. Yeah.
Hi, it's another structural question, which I heard earlier in the day, and I'm just repeating. I was wondering what your guys' thoughts are on how the binge-watching phenomenon changed how we think about story structure, and whether it did influence it or maybe it didn't.
I was there as well, Certainly, the fashion is very much long-form story. So at the moment, it appears that the kind of CSI single-story arc with very little overall serial character development seems to be not in fashion at the moment, and it'll come back one way or the other. But I don't really see the difference. You still write an episode to make the end of the episode as much of a hook as possible. Whether that means you're trying to lure the viewer into pressing the button to watch another episode now, or you're going to lure the viewer into being excited about watching again next week, I don't really see a technical difference. I mean, we had a big hit with this when we were at the top of our game, and I remember we got a ridiculous share, like a 65% share at one point, and when one of the major characters was killed, it was a talking point on TV the next day. It was a big deal in that town, and that was around about the same time that Kevin Spacey, having started doing House of Cards, had done the McTaggart lecture in the UK saying the days of the 60% share is over and everything's going to be download now, and we were over in Ireland going, no, actually, we just got one. But I don't think it makes any difference. The only thing that I do know is what was odd about this show was that the RTE construction is 2 ad breaks, so basically 3 acts. And I've never known a writer embrace the commercial break like he did. In fact, he didn't really write 6 hours of television. He basically wrote 18 20-minute acts. It was just build. But whether you binge it or it's weekly, I still think the job to hook the audience at the end is the same.
A question here?
Hello. Actually, I have 2 questions. One is TV series have to appeal to many people, obviously. So when you select plots, do you have any kind of topics you prefer? Do you see any kind of themes that emerge, like nowadays, that are more popular and you think would be more in demand and appeal to more people? And second question is that a lot of series, a lot of shows like are very brilliant, interesting in the first 2 series, and then third series is only prolonged because of the fans' demand, but the story is bad, and then fans actually even more disappointed. So when is a good time to stop?
You can choose which of the 2 questions you prefer. I think to the first question is a bit broad and difficult, and actually, as Steve was saying earlier, the situation is not that all series should appeal to all publics. In some public broadcasters, that is the case, but you have cable, you have loads of niche series, and many more of those than ever. So it's not about thinking what will everybody like. It's more about thinking what am I interested in, what do I want to work on.
Yeah, and I'll add to that because, as a broadcaster, we're looking for ideas that are coming in. And I mean, there's an old HBO rule that says that if you're the most creative person in the room, you're doing something wrong. It's not my job to tell you what you should be writing about. It absolutely must come from you. The only qualification I think for HBO is, I'm not saying we're only looking for genre, but there's a kind of line, the other side of which is, you look at all the great HBO shows, Sopranos is still a gangster show, Westworld is still a Western, and they still might subvert and flip and play with the kind of forms, but nonetheless, they still deliver some exciting stuff like car chases. So, we're not looking for willfully obscure stuff, but it's definitely not my job to say this politics or this, that, or the other. It should come from you.
And the other question, when do you kill a series? Is that an easy decision to make?
Yeah. No, I mean...
And you've been on different sides.
You always, we talked about this all the time. We never wanted to do a series that was less good than the one before. I mean, I'm a great admirer of shows like This Life that just did 2, done, out. He came back to the wedding, punched the guy on the nose, finished, done. So yeah, there is something to be said for finishing. But if you're in America, there are huge amounts of money at stake. I look at Breaking Bad, and I think that he meant to finish it at the end of series 4. He phones his wife and he says, "I won." You think, you're done. You've just about finished there. And I never thought Breaking Bad was the same show afterwards. I thought that, Breaking Bad was always at its best in that middle around series 2, 3, and 4, where it was experimental. You could feel a bunch of guys in a room going, "Can we get away with an exploding tortoise? I don't know. Do you think they'll let us do that?" And it was great. There was a freshness about it. I've always found the last 2 series starting to believe its own press. Yes, we are the best show in the world, aren't we? That's just my take. But yeah, there is a point where you leave the stage.
Yep, I think we should move on to another clip, but we will keep your questions in mind. What we're talking about here is, is conceptual work, and your next clip, we're moving into something else, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's still kind of in the same ball game. It's a clip from Dogville by Lars von Trier that I basically brought to encourage you all in a way, because it's a testimony that even directors as Lars von Trier can be really wrong about what he thought would be a good idea. I think that Dogville, as all of his films was a big challenge in finding the language of that particular film. It was the idea was to try to combine film, theater, and literature. And theater is pretty obvious because it's all in a stage. But how exactly the literate element came in was something that we explored and discovered all through the process. We had some ideas up front, but during the editing, we found that the high-angle shots that were done for almost all scenes were somehow connecting to the voiceover. So for me, the literate element was something about that you can stay distant to something. It was like if you read a novel and you say, they were driving towards the little town through the beautiful landscape and the birds were singing and blah, 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 blah. It was kind of like you're resting for a bit and then you plunge directly into the local talk between the vicar or the grocer or something like that. That way of thinking from literature we found during the editing. But I think that we were all pretty sure that the idea that we could see through the whole town, as there are no walls, we could leave a situation and see it from far away with some of the other villages in the foreground would be extremely interesting and something that we would do constantly. And therefore they filmed they shot all the scenes like that as well. To a degree, so Lauren Bacall asked him in the morning, which part of my back will you film this day? So that was part of it. And basically we found in the editing that it was completely not interesting to leave a scene that you were in the middle of just because there were no walls. So that was an example of why that sometimes you can be really sure of something and then it turns out to be a bad idea. But I think that the main focus in the process when we work with him is that you try it anyway, and you have to try things to figure out if it is something. And in this case, it's this sample shows the only time in the whole film where it actually really makes sense to have the foreground and something happening in the background. And the first time it makes sense was because it was connected to content. And I think that's the main point, basically. If the way that you do things are not connected to content, it doesn't matter. In this case, I think it's a recognizable thought for all of us that if something terrible happens in our lives, we don't really understand that the world continues outside our windows. And I think it's that recognizable idea that works in this clip.
Let's see. But something like that.
So please do your mistakes. That's the point.
Yeah, we're running a bit out of time, but we should see a series conclusion, Trust and Love. Was there a quick question from up here that we could take?
Quick answer, but probably a long answer. In the collaboration, you spoke earlier about coming to a mutual understanding of the visual language. How difficult is it for a writer and a director to come together and to have that same vision? And have you had both positive and negative experiences in dealing with that?
I don't know, I must say. In this case, the writer and the director is the same. I think it's a very long subject connected to the TV series thing, but you know more about that.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, Jordan on the Borgias, he was writing them all, he was directing. It took me a little while to figure out why his scripts were so spare and so lacking in. They were essentially dialogue lists, and it took me a little while to realize, of course, you've only ever directed your own stuff. You don't need to describe what St. Peter's Cathedral looks like because you're going to go down to the art department and tell them. But sometimes what we did with the Irish thing is Stuart understood very, very clearly that we're moving pretty fast, that we had a kind of doco style, that we were grabbing stuff on the run. There wasn't really weather cover. If it was raining, we might have to go inside. But there were parts of the script that I was very clear what the image was that he had in his head. So there were areas where we would not insist, but it should be this way, and in areas where it would vary from case to case.
But I'm sure there is some, the shows that are good and the way people work together. And of course you cannot plan it always. I mean, you hire people, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But there is some correlation between how well the collective works and the series that comes out.
I think that's part of the magic. Certainly on that we were extremely location. The writer had a very big appetite for the number of locations. So we were shooting 6, 7, 8 pages a day, very often with location moves, and all of this required a necessity of shooting very fast, which means that you needed top actors who were really going to get there. It meant that certain things on the truck we didn't use. We never used track. We very rarely used a dolly. Everything was pretty much on the shoulder or on a slider just to get a little bit of. So I think what worked quite well with us was that the production necessities forced a slightly punkish vibe that was exactly right for the vibe of the show. I mean, nobody plans that, and nobody doesn't want more money to make the show with, but it worked very well. The director that we had was kind of pretty hopeless in prep because he was that kind of director, but he was the kind of director who, and there wasn't much point in planning because we were moving so fast that probably when we got there, something hadn't turned up. So we had a director who was absolutely brilliant at working with what was in front of him in a very, very short period of time. I would be there going, don't forget this thing in episode 4. We had the cameraman was an ex-documentary guy, and essentially what would happen was that David, the director, would throw a bunch of emotional cards in the air, and that cameraman would just catch the right little look, the right little turn of the head. I don't know how he did it, but these things were all part of the whole thing, which isn't just a script and a list of instructions of how to do it. The whole thing becomes a kind of three-dimensional experience when it works well.
Introduce the final.
How long do
bit.
I have? Do I need to move quite?
We're a bit out of time, but give us the lowdown.
Well, I just give you. I wanted to pick up on something that you said about increase the emotional moment, because I think that, and I'm more of a story guy than this kind of thing, but I love that it's playing with notions of reality and non-reality, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about it. It's all fake really, and fascinating how those emotions can push through. So a little bit of background. We came, having done the second series, Nidge is now the gang boss, that all worked, and we sit down and we go, what are we going to do now? And now we're a hit, we've got some awards, and that slightly scary thing of trying to figure it out. And again, it's another example of how it's head and heart at the same time. On the one hand, Stuart was building a kind of political thing. He wanted to go deeper into Ireland. He wanted to write about Ireland. And he'd found this thing that he wanted to do about the status at that point of the continuity IRA, the dissident remnants of the IRA, which, as I'm sure you know, was the terrorist organization that worked through the 70s and 80s and is now at peace. And there's a bunch of guys who haven't signed up to the peace process, and they are still active and dangerous. And what Stuart had found, and then he phoned me up and said, I want to do the IRA. Go, oh no, not the IRA. Nobody wants to hear about that. That's all over. But what he'd found in his researches was that, they've always been kind of left-leaning. The guys who are left in those organizations are still on the housing estates, and they were cleaning up the estates of drug dealers. They were using violence on drug dealers. They were fining drug dealers. Whoa, hang on a minute. You mean money's changing hands? Eventually, what his argument was, there is no difference between that and a protection racket, and it was an interesting area. And he wanted to look at the plastic paddy thing and these guys and the whole Irish kind of thing. He wanted to get deeper into Irishness and had found this interesting thing that was happening there. At the same time, we're going, well, what do we do? How does it work? How does Macbeth work? How does Tony Soprano work? We now have, and I use that advisedly, because we had half an eye on Richard III and Macbeth. What happens? The king takes the throne. Stuart said, what happens next? He's tested. What does that mean? How do these guys work? Why do people watch shows about monsters? Why would you watch Tony Soprano or Walter White? What's the mechanisms? And I said, well, a simple way of approaching that is story, why don't we bring in a bigger monster? And if there's one thing I can say to any writers out there, and the key to storylining is motivation. It's all about goals and barriers. If you can find that memo that David Mamet wrote on the unit, he said there's 3 rules going into any given scene. What does this character want? Why do they want it now? And what is the bad thing that will happen if they don't get it? Dramatic stakes, goals, and barriers. That's what it's all about. So I said, here's how we're going to do it. We will maintain sympathy, not quite the right word, because we will continue to criticize Nidge morally, but we will make a compelling story by bringing in a bigger monster. What's the bigger monster? The IRA. Off we go. So I think I want to show you this scene because in terms of dramatic stakes, I don't think we could have reinforced it any more strongly. The other great idea that Stuart had, and this goes to a kind of concept that I'd known all my life, but I'd never really understood, the kind of Aristotelian notion of time and place. It's a very unusual kind of TV thing. But basically the idea was Nidge's gang has a disagreement with these scary dissident IRA guys in the first act. The first act played for about a day and a half. The second act took place on St. Patrick's Day. Now, if any of you have ever been in Dublin on St. Patrick's Day, it is quite extraordinary to see an entire town get drunk at the same time. It is, and it's their big, great party day. So the concept of the first episode of our Series 3 was Nidge goes to meet the scary guy and says, I'm sorry about the thing that happened, here's your money. And he goes, Nidge, don't worry about it. Let's have a drink, it's Paddy's Day. And then the whole of the rest of the episode took place over the next kind of 12 hours. And he wanted to capture the craziness of these guys, the craziness of a night on the town in Paddy's Day. Again, technology comes into it. We actually went out and filmed on St. Patrick's Day, put some cameras on the roof, get in the crowds, mixed it up with a few shots with some extras and the actors on a different day. And I think we got a sense of scale. I think we got a sense of the town and our guys really being out there. So scale is interesting as well. The episode got big halfway through. You had a real sense of Dublin. It goes on through the night, it goes on through the night. And then what happens is they end up drinking in this little basement bar with the scary guy. And the scary guy rapes or tries to rape one of the girlfriends. The girlfriend's boyfriend kicks him, basically attacks him. And then this scene is about what happens next. So I'll talk a bit more afterwards, but go clip. I think that's interesting. We couldn't have hit it more clearly. That's a series idea. The rest of this, 10 minutes before the end of the first episode, the rest of the episode is about burying the body, and then is the secret going to come out? The cops are onto the IRA, the poor girl's falling apart, she's been raped. And I think it does, it's playing a similar game to your Dogville thing. We're removing the scenery. Everything's been lights and action and extras, but it really comes down to 4 actors on a stage. I think that is the thing about television. In the end, it does share that with the theatre. You need terrific actors to be able to pull off performances like that. But, all of that there. And I'd forgotten the pressure that we're then putting on Nidge and the real life and death stakes allows you then to be extremely critical of him. He's never less sympathetic than he is that scene. He is not very sympathetic to this girl who's been raped. He is really horrible. And yet, the pressure on them all is so good that you somehow come in behind them. And that was, we got a whole series out of that. I think that's strong stuff.
Definitely. I think we have to close for now. Some people are looking in at the distance at us. But I hope you're encouraged to work in series and have some more ideas for how to do it. And first of all, we should thank Steve and Molly for being with us, sharing that.